Chapter 6, Part 1, Of More Love to Thee, The Life and Letters of Elizabeth Prentiss. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jennifer Painter. More Love to Thee, The Life and Letters of Elizabeth Prentiss, by George Prentiss. Chapter 6, Part 1. In Retreat Among the Alps, 1858 to 1860. 1. Life Abroad. Letters about the voyage and the journey from Havre to Switzerland. Chateau d'Oex. Letters from there. The Chalet Rosat. The Free Church of the Canton de Vaud. Pastor Panchard. Mrs. Prentiss passed more than 2 years abroad, mostly in Switzerland. They were years burdened with heavy cares, with ill health and keen solicitude concerning her husband. But they were also years hallowed by signal mercies of Providence, bright every now and then with floods of real sunshine, and sweetened by many domestic joys. Although quite secluded from the world a large portion of the time, her solitude was cheered by the constant arrival of letters from home. During these years, also, she was first initiated into full communion with nature, and what exquisite pleasure she tasted in this new experience, her own pen will tell. Indeed, this period affords little of interest except that which blossomed out of her domestic life, her friendships, and her love of nature. She travelled scarcely at all, and caught only fugitive glimpses of society or of the treasures of European art. A few simple records, therefore, of her retired home life and of the impressions made upon her by Alpine scenery, as contained in her letters, must form the principal part of this chapter. Her correspondence, while abroad, would make a large volume by itself. In selecting from it what follows, the aim has been to present, as far as possible, a continuous picture of her European sojourn, drawn by herself. Were a faithful picture of its quiet yet varied scenes to be drawn by another hand, it would include features wholly omitted by her, features radiant with a light and beauty not of earth. It would reflect a sweet patience, a heroic fortitude, a tender sympathy, a faith in God, and an upholding, comforting influence, which in sharp exigencies the Christian wife and mother knows so well how to exercise, and which are inspired only by the Lord Jesus himself. The friend to whom the following letter was addressed years ago passed away from earth, but her name is still enshrined in many hearts. The story of her generous and affectionate kindness, as also that of her children, would fill a whole chapter. You will never know how we have loved and honoured you all, straight through, wrote Mrs. Prentiss to one of them many years later. To Mrs. Charles W. Woolsey, Havre, July the 11th, 1858. How many times during our voyage we had occasion to think of and thank you and yours. A dozen sheets like this would fail to tell you. Of all your kind arrangements for our comfort, not one failed of its object. Whether the chair or my sack had most admirers I do not know, but I cannot imagine how people ever get across the ocean without such consolations on the way. As to the grapes, they kept perfectly to the last day and proved delicious. The box then became a convenient receptacle for the children's toys, while the cake box has turned into a medicine chest. We had not so pleasant a voyage as is usual at this season, it being cold and rainy and foggy much of the time. However, none of us suffered much from seasickness, Mr. Prentiss not in the least. His chief discomfort was from want of sleep. On the whole, we had a less dreary time than we anticipated, and perhaps the stupidity in which we were engulfed for 2 weeks was a wholesome refuge from the excitement of the month previous to our departure. We landed in a deluge of rain, and the only article in our possession that alarmed the officers of the custom house was not the sewing machine, which was hardly vouchsafed to look, but your cake box. We were thankful to tumble pell-mell into a carriage, and soon to find ourselves in a comfortable room before a blazing fire. We go round with a phrase book and talk out of it, so if anybody ever asks you what sort of people the Prentiss family are, and what are our conversational powers, you may safely and veraciously answer, they talk like a book. M already asks the French names of almost everything, and is very glad to know that we have got at Europe, and when asked how she likes France, declares, "Me likes that." We go off to Paris in the morning. I will let Mr. Prentiss tell his own story. Meanwhile, we send you everyone our warmest love and thanks. After a few days in Paris, the family hastened to Chateau d'Eux, where New York friends awaited them. Chateau d'Eux is a mountain valley in the canton of Vaud, on the right bank of the Sarine, 22 miles east of Lausanne, and is one of the loveliest spots in Switzerland. Aside from its natural beauties, it has some historical interest. It was once the home of the Counts of Gruyere, and the ruins of their ancient chateau are still seen there. The free church of the village was at this time under the care of Pastor Pinchaud, a favourite pupil and friend of Vinet. He was a man of great simplicity and sweetness of character, an excellent preacher, and wholly devoted to his little flock. Mrs. Prentiss and her husband counted his society and ministrations a smile of heaven upon their sojourn in Chateau d'Eux. To Mrs. Henry B. Smith, Chateau d'Eux, July the 25th, 1858. Our ride from Havre to Paris was charming. We had one of those luxurious cars, to us unknown, which is intended to hold only 8 persons, but which has room for 10. The weather was perfect, and the scenery all the way very lovely and quite novel. A and I kept mourning for you and M to enjoy it with us, and both agreed that we would gladly see only half there was to see, and go half the distance we were going, if we could only share with you our pleasures of every kind. On reaching Paris and the hotel, we found we could not get pleasant rooms below the 5th story. They were directly opposite the garden of the Tuileries, where birds were flying and singing, and it was hard to realize that we were in the midst of that great city. We went sightseeing very little. A and I strolled about here and there, did a little shopping, stared in at the shop windows, wished M had this and you had that, and then strolled home and panted and toiled and groaned up our 5 flights, and wrote in our journals, or rested, or made believe study French. We went to the Jardin des Plantes in order to let the children see the zoological garden. We also drove through the Bois de Boulogne and spent part of an evening in the garden of the Palais Royal, and watched the people drinking their tea and coffee and having all sorts of good times. We found Paris far more beautiful than we expected, and certainly as to cleanliness it puts New York ages behind. We were 4 days in coming from Paris to this place. We went up the Lake of Geneva on one of the finest days that could be asked for, and then the real joy of our journey began. Paris and all its splendours faded away at once and forever before those mountains, and as George had never visited Geneva or seen any of this scenery, my pleasure was doubled by his. Imagine, if you can, how we felt when Mont Blanc appeared in sight. We reached Vevey just after sunset, and were soon established in neat rooms of quite novel fashion. The floors were of unpainted white wood, checked off with black walnut. The stairs were all of stone, the stove was of porcelain, and every article of furniture was odd. But we had not much time to spend in looking at things within doors, for the lake was in full view, and the mountain tops were roseate with the last rays of the setting sun, and the moon soon rose, and added to the whole scene all it wanted to make us half believe ourselves in a pleasant dream. I often asked myself, can this be I? And if it be I, as I hope it be. Early next morning, which was dear little M's birthday, we set off in grand style for Château d'Eux. We hired a monstrous voiture which had seats inside for 4, and on top, with squeezing, seats for 3, besides the driver's seat, had 5 black horses, and dashed forth in all our splendour, 10 precious souls, and all agog. I made a sandwich between Mr. S. and George on top, and the bonnes and children were packed inside. This was our great day. The weather was indescribably beautiful. We felt ourselves approaching a place of rest and a welcome home. The scenery was magnificent, and already the mountain air was beginning to revive our exhausted souls and bodies. We sat all day hand in hand, literally lost in wonder. With all I had heard ever since I was born about these mountains, I had not the faintest idea of their real grandeur and beauty. We arrived here just after sunset, and soon found ourselves among our friends. Mrs. Buck brought us up to our new home, which we reached on foot, as our voiture could not ascend so high, by a little winding path, by the side of which a little brook kept running along to make music for us. It is a regular Swiss chalet, much like the little models you have seen, only of a darker brown, and on either side the mountains stand ranged, so that look where we will, we are feasted to our utmost capacity. We have 4 small, but very neat, pretty rooms. Our floors are of unpainted pine, as white and clean as possible. The room in which we spend our time, and where I am now writing, I must fully set before you. Our centre table has had a nice new red cover put on it today, with a vase of flowers. It holds all our books, and is the ornament of the room. In front of the sofa is a red rug on which we say our prayers. Over it is a picture, and over G's table is another. Out of the window you see first a pretty little flower garden, then the valley dotted with brown chalets, then the background of mountains. Behind the house you go up a little winding path, and can go on for ever without stopping if you choose, along the sides of which flowers such as we cultivate at home grow in profusion. You can't help picking them and throwing them away to snatch a new handful. The brook takes its rise on this side and runs musically along as you ascend. Yesterday we all went to church at 9:30 and had our first experience of French preaching, and I was relieved to find myself understanding whole sentences here and there. And now I need not, I suppose, wind up by saying we are in a charming spot. All we want, as far as this world goes, is health and strength with which to enjoy all this beauty and all this sweet retirement, and these, I trust, it will give us in time. Isabella wears like gold. She is everything I hoped for, and from her there has not been even a tone of discomfort since we left. But my back aches and my paper is full. We all send heaps of love to you all and long to hear. August the 10th. We breakfast at 8 on bread and honey, which is the universal Swiss breakfast, dine at 1 and have tea at 7. I usually sew and read and study all the forenoon. After dinner we take our alpenstocks and go up behind the house, a bit of mountain climbing which makes me realize that I am no longer a young girl. I get only so high and then have to come back and lie down. George and Annie beat me all to pieces with their exploits. I do not believe we could have found anywhere in the world a spot better adapted to our needs. How you would enjoy it! I perfectly yearn to show you these mountains and all this green valley. The views I send will give you a very good idea of it, however. The smaller chalet in the print is ours. In a little summer house opposite, Isabella now sits at work on the sewing machine. My best love to all three of your dear chicks, and to your husband, if he's willin'. To Mrs. H. B. Washburn, Chateau d'Eux, August the 21st, 1858. We slipped off without any leave taking, which I was not sorry for. I did not want to bid you good-bye. We had to say it far too often as it was, and when we fairly set sail we had not an emotion left, but sank at once into a state of entire exhaustion and stupidity. We thought Paris very beautiful until we came in view of the Lake of Geneva, Mont Blanc, and other handiworks of God, when straightway all its palaces and monuments and fountains faded into insignificance. I began to feel that it was wicked for a few of my friends, who were born to enjoy the land of lakes and mountains, not to be here enjoying it, and you were one of them, you may depend. However, whenever I have had any such pangs of regret in relation to you, I have consoled myself with the reflection that with your enthusiastic temperament, artist eye, and love of nature, you never would survive even a glimpse of Switzerland. The land of William Tell would be the death of you. When you are about 80 years old, have cooled down about 10 degrees below zero, have got a little dim about the eyes, and a little stiff about the knees, it may possibly be safe for you to come and break yourself in gradually. I have not forgotten how you felt and what you did at the White Mountains, you see. Well, joking apart, we are in a spot that would just suit you in every respect. We are not in a street or a road or any of those abominations you like to shun, but our little chalet, hardly accessible save on foot, is just tucked down the side of the gentle slope leading up the mountain. It is remote from all sights but those magnificent ones afforded by the range of mountains, the green rich valley, and the ever-varying sky and cloudland, and all sounds save that of a brook, which runs hurrying down its rocky little channel, and keeps us company when we want it. I ought, however, to add that my view of this particular valley is that of a novice. People say the scenery here is tame in comparison with what may be seen elsewhere, but look which way I will, from front windows or back windows, at home or abroad, I am as one at a continual feast, and what more can one ask? Mr. Prentiss feels that this secluded spot is just the place for him, and as it is a good point from which to make excursions on foot or otherwise, he and Mr. Stearns have already made several trips and seen splendid sights. How much we have to be grateful for! For my part, I would rather, far rather, have come here and stayed here blindfold than not to have come with my dear husband. So all I have seen and am experiencing I regard as beauty and felicity thrown in. To Mrs. Abigail Prentiss, Chateau d'Eux, September the 5th, 1858. I wish we had you, my dear mother, here among these mountains, for the cool, bracing air would help to build you up. Both Mr. Stearns and George have come back from Germany looking better than when they started on their trip 2 weeks ago. It has been very cold. The thermometer some mornings at 8 o'clock stands at 46 degrees, and the mountains being all covered with snow. We slept with a couple of bottles of hot water at our feet, and 2 blankets, and a comforter of eiderdown over us, after going to bed early to get warm. My sewing machine is a great comfort, and the peasants enjoy coming down from the mountains to see it. Besides, I find something to do on it every day. I often wish I could set you down in the midst of the church to which we go every Sunday, if only to show you how the people dress. A bonnet is hardly seen there, everybody wearing a black silk cap or a bloomer. I wear a bloomer, a brown one trimmed with brown ribbon. An old lady sits in front of me who wears a white cap, much after the fashion of yours, and on top of that is perked a monstrous bloomer, trimmed with black gauze ribbon. Her dress is linsey woolsey, and for outside garment she wears a black silk half-handkerchief, as do all the rest. No light dress or ribbon is seen. I must tell you now something that amused A and me very much yesterday at dinner. A French gentleman, who married a Spanish lady 4 years ago, sits opposite us at the table, and he and his wife are quite fascinated with M, watch all her motions, and whisper together about all she does. Yesterday they got to telling us that the lady had been married when only 12 years old to a gentleman of 32, had 2 children, and was a grandmother, though not yet 36 years old. She said she carried her doll with her to her husband's house, and he made her learn a geography lesson every day till she was 14, when she had a baby of her own. I asked her if she loved her husband, and she said, "Oh, yes," only he was very grave, and scolded her, and shut her up when she wouldn't learn her lessons. She said that her own mother, when 36 years old, had 14 children, all of whom are now living, 12 of them boys, and that the laws of Spain allow the father of 6 sons to ask a favour for them of the king, but the father of 12 may ask a favour for each one. So every one of her brothers had an office under the government or was an officer in the army. I don't know when I have been more amused, for she, like all foreigners, was full of life and gesture, and showed us how she tore her hair and threw down her books when angry with her husband. The children are all bright and well. The first time we took the cars after landing, M was greatly delighted. "Now we're going to see Grandma," she cried. Mrs. Buck got up a picnic for her and had a treat of raspberries and sponge cake frosted. The cake had M on the top in red letters. Baby is full of life and mischief. The day we landed he said "Papa," and now he says "Mama." Isabella is everything we could ask. She is trying to learn French, and A hears her recite every night. George found some furnished rooms at Montreux, which he has taken for 6 months from October, and we shall thus be keeping house. A has just rushed in and snatched her French Bible, as she is going to the evening service with some of the English family. You will soon hear all about us from Mr. Stearns. The following letter will show how little power either her own cares or the charms of nature around her had to quench her sympathy for friends in sorrow. To Miss A. H. Woolsey, Chateau d'Oex, September the 11th, 1858. We received your kind letter this morning. We had already had our sympathies excited in behalf of you all by seeing a notice of the death of the dear little child in a paper lent to us by Mrs. Buck, and were most anxious to hear all the particulars you have been so good to give us. This day, which 15 years ago we marked with a white stone, and which we were to celebrate with all our hearts, has passed quite wearily and drearily. There is something indescribably sad in the details of the first bereavement which has fallen within the circle of those we love. Perhaps, too, old sorrows of our own clamoured for a hearing, and then, too, there was the conviction, "This is not all death will do while the ocean severs you from kindred and friends." We long to speak to you many words of affectionate sympathy and Christian cheer, but long before we can make them reach you, I trust you will have felt sure that you were at least remembered and prayed for. It is a comfort that no ocean separates us from Him who has afflicted you. The loss to you each and all is very great, but to the mother of such a child it is beyond description. Faith alone can bear her through this, but faith can. What a wonderful little creature the sweet Ellie must have been. We were greatly touched by your account of her singing that beautiful hymn. It must have been divinely ordered that she should leave such a precious legacy behind her. And though her loveliness makes her loss the greater, the loss of an unlovely, wayward child would surely be a heavier grief. I never know where to stop when I begin to talk about the death of a little one, but before I stop I want to ask you to tell Mrs. H. one word from me, which will not surprise and will perhaps comfort her. It is this: neither his father nor myself would be willing to have God now bereave us of the rich experience of 7 years ago, when our noble little boy was taken away. We have often said this to each other, and oftener said it to him, who, if he took, also gave much. But after all, we cannot say much to comfort either Mrs. H. or you. We can only truly, heartily, and always sympathise with you. Mr. Prentiss and Mr. Stearns have spent a fortnight in jaunting about, beginning at Thun and ending at Munich. They both came home looking fresher and better than when they left. But Mr. P. is not at all well now, and will have his ups and downs, I suppose, for a long time to come. We can step out at any moment into a beautiful path, and turn which way we will, meet something charming. Yesterday he came back for me, having found a new walk, and we took our sticks and went out to enjoy it together till we got, as it were, fairly locked in by the mountains, and could go no further. Only to think of having such things as gorges and waterfalls and roaring brooks right at your back door. The seclusion of this whole region is, however, its great charm to us, and to tell the truth, the primitive simplicity of style of dress, etc., is quite as charming to me as its natural beauty. We took tea one night last week with the pastor of the Free Church. He lives in a house for which he pays $30 a year, and we were quite touched and pleased with his style of living: white pine walls and floors, unpainted, and everything else to match. We took our tea at a pine table, and the drawing room to which we retired from it was a corner of the same room, where was a little mite of a sofa and a few books, and a cheerful lamp burning. All this time I have not answered your question about the 4th of July. We had great doings, I assure you. Mr. P. made a speech, and ran up and down the saloon like a war horse. He was so excited and pale that I did not enjoy it much, thinking any instant he would faint and fall. Mr. Cleveland was the orator of the day, and acquitted himself very well, they all said. I was in my berth at the time of its delivery, saving myself for the dinner and toasts, and so did not hear it. The whole affair is to be printed. There was a great cry of "Prentiss, Prentiss," after the captain's dinner, and at last the poor man had to respond in a short speech to a toast to the ladies. I suppose you know that he considers all women as angels. Mr. Stearns left us on Thursday to set his face homewards. End of chapter 6, part 1.